Chapter 19. Candor. It's the sound of rustling that wakes him. It seems unusual. It's been days since the last time he was so tired that he slept until Katara arrived. And although his short walk and the final healing session yesterday left him exhausted, he's been getting better. He's nearly as strong as he's ever going to be. He shouldn't be sleeping until mid-morning. He pries his eyes open to find the world bathed in a wash of pale grays. It's still early. Too early for Katara to be here. But the rustling, though quiet, is still unmistakable. It must be coming from something else. A badger frog hopping around in the undergrowth, probably. He doesn't see Katara nearby, so it's probably nothing. Before he can close his eyes and let sleep overtake him again, he sees something else. A heavy stick, stripped bare and cut clean at the ends, lies beside him. He sits up. The stick is sturdy-looking and polished almost perfectly smooth, and the far end is bent almost perpendicular and wrapped with narrow bands of leather. Is this a cane for him? And if it is, then Katara has to be. He looks out of the cave just in time to see a flash of red retreating out of sight. His heart sits in his throat. Something is wrong. He's known it for days now, and this is all the confirmation he needs. Katara? He doesn't take any more time to look around. The unfamiliar bundles lined up around the edges of the cave and the curl of paper lying beside him don't matter right now. Instead, he grabs the cane and shoves himself to his feet as quickly as he can. It still isn't very fast. Not fast enough, he fears, and even with the support of the cane, his right leg protests at every motion, but she's close. If he can't catch Katara, maybe he can at least try to call her back before she disappears without explanation. He makes it as far as the mouth of the cave before he misses a step and pitches forward with a cry of pain. The impact forces the air out of his lungs, and he lies still on his stomach, gulping for breath. Damn it. He can live with a sore, barely functioning leg. He can live with leaning on a cane and limping around for the rest of his life. He doesn't particularly like it, but he can survive this way. He'll adapt to it in time. But if his stupid, weak legs are going to keep him from Katara, if he's going to be separated from her just because he can't move quickly enough to stop her, then he doesn't think he'll ever be able to forgive himself. Through the rush of his own heartbeat, he can't hear her approach. But after a few desperate pulses, after he manages a few shuddering breaths, a soft, warm hand clasps his shoulder. What are you trying to do, Zuko? Her voice wavers like she's on the edge of tears. You're going to hurt yourself. He doesn't care. He's been hurt for her sake before. Doesn't she know that? She helps him up to his knees, and he can see her hands shaking as she picks up the cane and presses it into his hands. I thought you were asleep. I was. Considering the fact that he hasn't entirely caught his breath, the words come out with a surprising amount of force. It isn't even sunrise yet. You're never here this early. Are you... His throat keeps growing tighter, and he has to pause for a breath. Are you leaving me? He hopes that she'll deny it. Maybe she's just bringing him supplies. Maybe she's planning to find a few more things and then return when he usually wakes up. Maybe she wants to let him rest a while longer before she comes back at her normal time in the middle of the day. Maybe things will be fine. She's been taking care of him for well over a week. It isn't that unusual for her to come and go, for her to bring him supplies when he isn't expecting it. Katara places her hands on his shoulders and brushes a thumb ever so softly along his jawline. Her eyes lock with his for just an instant, and then, before she can speak, before she can offer the reassurance he is longing for, her face begins to crumple. She looks away and presses a hand over her mouth as the tears begin streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Zuko. He isn't sure that he remembers how to breathe. He doesn't care. The world is crashing down around him, and he barely dares to move. He doesn't want to disturb anything. He doesn't want to dig any deeper. He's been abandoned before, and breaking through the surface never does any good. It only makes the pain worse. For some reason, he still can't stop himself. You weren't going to say anything? She had promised. Yesterday afternoon, she'd kissed him and promised to tell him everything, but now she'd tried to leave without a single word. He doesn't care about all the supplies she's left behind. He doesn't care if he can last a year here on his own. He doesn't want to be alone. He wants to know that there's at least one person in the world who cares about him a little. He'd thought that Katara might be that person. Apparently, he's been wrong about that all along. I meant to. I wanted to get to the village and back one more time before you woke up. She's crying, and it's all too obvious in her voice. I was making sure that you had somewhere to go after. A pause. And I wrote you a letter. I wanted to tell you everything in person, but I wasn't sure I'd be able to get through it without crying. Obviously, I can't. Zuko can't look her in the eye. At any other time in his life, he would have run. If he were better with his cane, he might have tried it again. He doesn't want to hear what comes next. If she's leaving, he doesn't want an explanation. Things are bad enough already. He doesn't want them to get worse. The hand on his shoulder tightens a little, and she finds his hand with the other. I'm sorry. Ever since I got my brother's letter, I've been trying to find another way. But I can't. There's nothing I can do. She chokes on a sob, then leans forward and buries her face against his neck as she wraps her arms around him. I don't want to leave you. Then why are you? His voice feels strangled and his shoulders are stiff. He almost regrets asking. He doesn't want to know her reasons, not really. He's almost certain that the answer will tear him apart. That Katara will tell him that this has been her plan all along, that she's always been planning to heal him just enough so that he can survive on his own before abandoning him to whatever fate may find him. The worst part of all of this is that he can only blame himself. He should never have hoped for anything more than that. He's an idiot for convincing himself that she could really care about him. The letter. My friends are coming back for me. They should be here tomorrow morning. She sniffles and pulls just far enough back to meet his eyes, hands resting lightly on his shoulders. I have to go with them. There's still the war to think about, and I can't leave my friends to fight alone, even if I want to. There's clearly something wrong with him. He ought to know better than to ask anything more, but the words come on their own. There's so little left for him to lose anyway. You want to stay? He can hear the bitterness in his own voice. Her eyes are rimmed with red, and she shakes her head, looking miserable. Not exactly. I don't want to spend my life out here. I miss my friends and my family. I don't like spending so much of my time in a cave. Right. So it's exactly as he thought. She cups her hands around his jaw and rests her forehead against his as yet another wave of tears washes over her. But I don't want to leave you. I wish I could choose both. He shouldn't believe her. He's made a fool of himself by being too trusting before. It's come close to costing his life several times. But it doesn't sound like she's lying, and he can't think of a reason she would be. Maybe it's just habit. Maybe he just wants to trust her because she's been helping him for so long. Maybe he just can't believe that she could have come so far if she always meant to hurt him in the end. This was the best option I could come up with. You're safe out here. I brought enough food and water to last you a few weeks, and by then you should be able to make it to the village. It sounds like she's begging him to understand. That's why I was headed down there. I was going to tell them that you're coming back and make sure that they'll look after you. You're going to have a place to stay and lots of people who care about you. Everything will work out. She sounds sincere. It sounds like she wants him to stay safe and healthy, even if she can't ensure it herself. He wants to believe her. Why else would she have given up so many of her own provisions for him? Why else would she have taken the time to carve a cane for him when he could have done it himself? He has to believe her. If it turns out that she's lying, then there's nothing left that he can trust. He has to believe in something or he'll lose himself. Katara. He begins, but he doesn't know what he's supposed to say after that. He isn't good with words, and he never has been. All he manages is a grimace before he looks away again. What is it? Are you hurt? Though it wavers with tears, her voice is still unbelievably soft. That looked like a bad fall. I can still heal you one more time, but you'll have to be careful after. He shakes his head. Just bruises. I'm fine. The hand hovering toward his chest pauses in midair, and Katara clutches his hand instead. Please, promise me that you'll be careful when I'm gone. The villagers are going to take care of you, but it's not going to be the same. Zuko thinks he manages to nod. Of course things will be different. With Katara gone, there won't be anyone around to heal him. One missed step, one slight stumble, and he might lose much of the progress he's made. There will be nothing to do but rest and hope that time might be enough to mend the damage. Of course he'll have to be more careful. He isn't very good at that, but it isn't like he'll have any choice in the matter. And if you take care of yourself, then there's no reason why you can't do whatever you were hoping for. You'll be able to walk much better once you've had a little more practice with your cane, and when you're stronger. Zuko stops listening and nearly forgets to breathe. What he's been hoping for. If Katara is leaving tomorrow morning, then this is his chance to ask her. Possibly his only chance. If she's leaving tomorrow morning, then he doesn't have time to worry about the fact that the ache in his right leg only seems to subside when Katara's healing water dulls the nerves in his back, or the fact that his cane feels unwieldy in his hand. He isn't ready for this. He isn't as strong as he'd like to be. He barely knows how to walk with his cane, and he might very well slow down Katara and her friends for a while. But if this is his only chance, then he needs to take it. If he doesn't, he's going to regret it for the rest of his life. Zuko can't remember the last time he was this nervous, or this desperate to speak. He squeezes her hands. Katara, wait. What I wanted to do. Her gaze pierces him, soft and pleading. Somehow, through the glint of the tears, her eyes look brighter than usual in the early morning light. His mouth goes dry, and it becomes all but impossible to speak. How can he possibly ask her for more than she's already given him? And yet, there's that pleading look in her eyes, and a small, stupid part of him begins to hope that she might be happy when he asks to join her. If she's telling the truth, if she really does want to find a way to stay with him, then there's a chance that she might say yes. I'm not going back to my father. He's told her as much before, but those are the first words that come to him. That part of my life is over. I'm done with it. I need to follow my destiny, but I think I've been wrong about what that means for a long time. The tension in his chest and his throat ease enough that it becomes a little easier to form the words. Katara, do you think that I could? A distant rumble from farther up the hill cuts him off, and Katara turns toward the sound. That's Appa. Her voice comes in a whisper, and when a chorus of cheerful shouts join the rumbling, her face crumples again. No, they aren't supposed to be here yet. She meets his gaze for the barest instant before she lunges forward and wraps her arms tight around his shoulders. I'm so sorry, Zuko. I have to go. No, he can't lose his chance this way. Katara, please just give me a minute to explain. I can't. I don't have any more time. She stretches upward and presses a kiss to his forehead, her lips just brushing the upper margin of his scar. Please take care of yourself. Standing, she pulls her hands out of his reach and wipes at her eyes. I'm going to miss you so much. Katara, please. She doesn't let him finish. Even as he tries to object, she turns away, walking slowly at first, then breaking into a jog, then a sprint. No matter how many times he calls out, Katara doesn't look back. It isn't until she's out of sight that it occurs to him to shout that he wants to come with her. That maybe, just maybe, she might have stopped for that. At least it might have caught her attention. But his voice is raw, and his chest feels tight, and it's too late to call out to her anyway. Katara is gone. He's failed. All he had to do was ask a simple question, and he couldn't even do that properly. He feels like his chest is being torn open, and his shoulders begin to convulse. He should be embarrassed to cry like this, but he can't help himself. It's not like there's anyone around to see him anyway. Katara is gone, and what's worse is that he might have stopped it if only he'd said the right thing. The sun is beginning to peek its way through the trees before Zuko finds the strength to push himself up with his cane and limp back into the cave. It hurts, and it feels worse than useless, but there's a letter waiting for him. Maybe he's just torturing himself, but he may as well read it. If it's the last he'll ever hear from Katara, then he needs to let the words sink in under his skin so that he can carry them forever. His hands shake as he unfurls the paper. Zuko, I'm sure this isn't what you had in mind when I promised to tell you everything. It's not what I was hoping for either, but I've tried rehearsing it all out loud more times than I can count. I hope you believe me when I say that I'll make more sense this way. If you're upset with me for saying this in a letter, I can't blame you for it. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself either. His eyes swim as he reads on. He can almost feel the warm weight of her head resting against his shoulder and hear her voice whispering the letter's contents aloud. It hurts. He can't deny that. But he sees tenderness in her handwriting and hears the soft echoes of affection that carry through her words. He isn't sure he'll ever feel that sort of kindness again, and he savors it while it lasts. As he continues, Zuko loses track of the words themselves and gets lost in the memory of her voice. It isn't until he nears the letter's end that her meaning begins to reach him once again. I can't tell you how many times I've daydreamed about taking you along with me when it was time to leave here. I still think about it sometimes. But I could never ask you to turn against your own people or put yourself in more danger. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm going to miss you, Zuko. I hope you find what you're looking for, and I hope it makes you happier than you can even imagine. Stay safe and please be kind to yourself. If I can, I'll find you when the war is over. The letter drops from his hands. Heart racing, Zuko clutches the cane instead. He can walk if he has to. So long as he's careful, so long as he moves slowly, he thinks that he can make it a good distance before he runs out of strength. And he doesn't know exactly where Katara went, but he at least knows which direction to look. She wanted to take him with her. He clings to that. She wanted to stay with him one way or another. And though she probably didn't mean to do it, she gave him one slim, fragile chance of finding her in the shape of a cane. Maybe Katara can't ask him to put himself in danger, but if he offers, then maybe there's a chance that she will say yes. Katara cries when she finds the others already at camp. It feels like she should be out of tears by now, but try as she might, she can't help herself. Some small, stupid part of her has been hoping that the shouts might have been all in her head, that she might still have a little more time. Of course it's all in vain. She knew that much when she turned away from Zuko. She knows that it's all over now. She can't even bring herself to mind when Toph calls her a sissy and punches her in the arm. It's better for the others to believe that she's only a wreck because she's been left alone for too long. At least it's a distraction. She tries to tell herself that things are better this way. With the provisions that she left for him, Zuko will last more than a week on his own. Longer, if he's careful. And so long as he rests, so long as he plans, he should be able to make it near enough to Shusoku for the villagers to find him. Zuko will be safe there. After all he's done, the village has to look after him. They will. She knows they will. She'll make sure of that once the others have gone to sleep tonight. It becomes a mantra. He'll be safe. He'll be safe. She can't tell whether she believes it or not. He'll be safe. He'll be safe. He'll be safe. The words begin to lose their meaning, but the rhythm carries on until at last her tears run dry. The boys are both eager to demonstrate their newfound mastery, and while they show off their new moves in the center of the clearing, Katara remains perched on the end of Appa's tail. Despite Toph's insistence that she didn't miss Katara at all, she sits close enough that their shoulders brush. It does nothing to soothe the ache in her chest, but watching the boys show off all their new skills does help to quiet her thoughts a bit. Maybe this is the best that she can hope for. She's happy to have the others back, and life with them is always busy enough to grant plenty of distractions. If she can keep herself occupied, maybe in time the ache of missing Zuko might begin to subside as well.
Come on, Aang! Focus!
Toph shouts across the clearing.
You had this down yesterday. Stop messing around!
Katara has to shake herself back to reality. It looks like he's doing well to me. He's a lot more focused than he used to be.
Yeah, you would say that,
Toph grumbles.
He can do better.
She stands and aims a rock at Aang.
Get your head out of the mud, Twinkle Toes!
Turning on the spot, Aang deflects the rock before it reaches him. He grins.
I am paying attention. See? Not good enough. If you were really paying attention, you'd notice everything.
Toph plants her feet wide apart and crosses her arms.
Now focus for real. What are you missing?
I'm not missing.
Think harder.
Aang sighs loudly, and he lets his head hang back, but he closes his eyes. Fine. There's Sokka, Appa, Momo, you, and Katara, he says, pointing to each of them in turn. There's something little in the bushes over there, maybe a meadow vole or something, and then he breaks off, brow furrowing.
Here it is.
Toph smirks in satisfaction.
There's what?
Sokka looks back and forth between the two of them.
What are you talking about? It's hard to tell,
Aang answers.
It's a long way off, but I think it's big enough to be a person. It is a person, you numbskull. Coming this way, too.
Katara's heart skips, and she is almost grateful for Sokka's immediate squawk. He flails with his sword and spins to search the surrounding forest, training forgotten.
Who? Where are they?
Toph marches across the clearing and whacks him on the back of the head.
Not that close. And I'm pretty sure we don't have to worry too much about this one. But Aang should worry about why it took him so long to notice.
Katara is frozen in place. She wants it to be Zuko. It terrifies her how much she wants that.
There's a lot of stuff between us and whoever that is, Aang protests. I can't see everything. Excuse me. If there's someone coming toward us, we need to figure out who it is.
Sokka points his sword downward.
No offense to your feet, but I'm not taking any chances on this one.
Yes. Before Toph can protest, Katara nods. Sokka's right. Her throat is raw, and it's hard to force out the words. But she needs to know. Even if it isn't Zuko, even if she's never going to see him again, she needs to be certain. It could be anyone. We have to go and see. Toph's brow furrows, and her sightless eyes stare unnervingly close to Katara's. Please don't ask. Please don't make me say it if it isn't him. At long last, Toph relents.
Fine. But if I'm right and it's not someone we have to worry about, I'm eating both your shares of the dried ash banana for a week.
Katara can hear a protest forming in Sokka's throat, and she leaps to her feet before he can speak. Okay, that's fine. Let's just go. Her voice is beginning to crackle with something akin to panic, and it takes a great deal of effort to ignore the puzzlement on Toph's face. Now, before they get away.
See? She gets it.
Sokka swings his sword to the north and motions for the others to follow.
After me.
Shaking her head, Toph kicks the ground with her heel, and a rock pops up in Sokka's path, just high enough to trip him.
Nice try, but you're going the wrong way, genius. Follow me.
She turns and marches out of the clearing. Southward. Down the hill. Roughly in the direction of Zuko's cave. Katara's heart sits in her throat. Though she wants to run on ahead, to get there ahead of everyone else, she doesn't dare. Terror grips at her insides, and her steps begin to lag slower and slower as they make their way down the familiar path toward Zuko's cave. If she's wrong, if it isn't him, she doesn't know how she can possibly continue. The dam inside her will burst, and she isn't certain she'll be able to hold back what's behind it. If it is him, it could be even worse. Sokka overtakes the other two at the crest of a small rise, then stops short.
What the fuck?
Katara can't remember how to breathe, and her legs feel like lead, but she doesn't stop until she is near enough to see past Sokka and the others. Zuko leans heavily on his cane, his face pale and drawn. He carries only a small bundle over one shoulder, and he is sweating through his tunic, but he's here.
Zuko?
Aang can't seem to decide between aiming his staff at Zuko or bowing to the reality that Zuko is neither threatening them nor in any condition to defend himself. He's scarcely staying on his feet, and if Katara weren't paralyzed by shock, by the other's presence, she would be at his side in an instant.
What are you doing here?
Sokka demands. He, unlike Aang, has no qualms and points space swords straight at Zuko's chest.
How did you find us?
Zuko meets Katara's eyes for just an instant before he looks back at Space Sword, forehead creased.
I'm pretty sure you guys found me.
Sokka splutters.
Shut up, Mr. Firefists. Why are you here? Were you looking for us?
Katara can't take her eyes off of Zuko, but he will barely look her way. As much as it stings to be ignored, part of her almost believes that it might be better this way. Maybe the others will take his word more seriously if they don't know what's happened between them. Yes, I was looking for the Avatar. Sokka throws his free hand up in the air.
I knew it! I knew it!
It's not like it sounds, Zuko protests. He attempts to kneel, but makes it only halfway to the ground before both knees buckle and he catches himself on his hands. His face contorts, but aside from a harsh, uneven gasp, he makes no sound. It takes all of Katara's will to hold herself back. She can't intervene. She can't explain this for him. She isn't even sure she knows what he's doing out here, whether he's here for her or for something else. Zuko's cane falls to the ground a few moments after him, and with a grimace, he pushes himself back onto his knees. By the resignation on his face, Katara suspects that he's stumbled, that he's fallen several more times on his way here. She wonders how many times. She wonders whether he's hurt. I want to help, he manages, voice strained. Sokka scoffs, but Toph elbows him before he can speak.
He's telling the truth.
Aang frowns.
What kind of help were you thinking of?
You still need a firebending master, don't you? Zuko sits a little straighter, still resting back on his heels. I can help with that.
Can you?
Sokka cocks an eyebrow upward.
I mean, no offense, but how exactly would that work? You know.
He gestures vaguely towards Zuko's legs.
Considering?
Zuko scowls. I thought you were going to be happy to find out that I can't fight anymore. Katara doesn't have to see Sokka's face to know the stricken expression he's wearing. She can feel it in the weight of the silence that closes in over them all. For all the times they used to wish to get Zuko off their trail, none of them would have ever wanted this. Not even Sokka. Zuko, she breathes. He meets her eyes for just a moment before he looks down and draws a long, steadying breath. My uncle taught me everything I know, and he hardly ever used his bending during my lessons. I'm sure I'll be able to do the same thing. He gives a slight bow in Aang's direction. If you'll give me a chance. Aang shifts and rubs the back of his neck, finally lowering his staff to the ground.
I will need a teacher pretty soon. As soon as possible, Toph says. You don't get to start slacking just because you're halfway decent at earthbending now.
Katara keeps her eyes on Zuko, watching as the apprehension draws all the lines in his face tight. She isn't quite sure how he's planning to teach Aang when his legs are still weak and the effort of walking leaves him in agony. From the look on his face, she suspects that he isn't sure either, but she's never known him to give up. He'll find a way. She trusts him with that.
Why?
Sokka asks.
Why would you help us? And why now?
Zuko won't look anyone in the eye, but he begins speaking slowly, choosing his words with caution. Because I've had a lot of time to think. That, and not much else to do. His forehead creases, and Katara can't tell whether he's in pain or simply searching for words. I almost died, and I realized that I had too many regrets and not a single person who would miss me. I have to change that now that I have a second chance. Silence falls again, and Katara is almost ready to run to him when Toph finally speaks.
Well, that sounds like a lot of bullshit to me, but at least it's honest bullshit.
She jabs both boys in the ribs.
I say we keep him. Ah!
Sokka squirms out of her reach and swats her poking finger away.
Stop it! And don't say it like that. You make it sound like we're taking people as pets. That's weird. I was thinking of it as voluntary kidnapping, But if you want to keep him as a pet, that's on you.
Sokka scowls and begins another protest, but Aang interrupts this time. I do need a teacher, but I can't put my friends in danger. Yes. Sokka points at Aang. That. What he said. Aang ignores him. But if Toph trusts Zuko, then I trust him too. What? Aang! Zuko is like the prince of doing bad things. Sokka points Space Sword at Zuko again. He's going to put us all in danger. How? Zuko rasps, scowling. If I did anything dangerous, you could all outrun me at a slow walk.
Also true,
Toph says. She seems to be enjoying this.
And besides, you're outvoted so far, Sokka. Aang agrees with me. There's only one of us who hasn't voted yet.
A sly smile creeps over her face.
Katara?
Her mouth feels dry, and she isn't sure whether she can remember how to speak. But she nods, and the words burst out of her before she can even think. He's staying with us. She aches to say more than that, to let all of her thoughts come pouring out, but her tongue sits heavy in her mouth, and she doesn't trust herself to say the right thing in front of the others. She has hundreds, thousands of things to say, but they're all for Zuko. Only for Zuko. If she can't find a few moments to speak to him alone, then she's going to burst at the seams. Sokka looks displeased, turning to glare at each of them in turn. But finally, he sighs. Okay, fine then. But we'll be keeping a close eye on you. All of us will. He hesitates a moment before replacing his sword in its scabbard. See you at camp, Zuko. You can't miss it. Just look for the clearing with a bunch of tents and the 10-ton flying fluff ball at the top of the hill. With that, he grabs both Toph and Aang by the shoulders and begins steering them away. Katara remains rooted in place. She hears what Sokka is trying to say in that one simple motion. We don't trust you. We all know who you are and what you've done. Either you can prove yourself now, or you can change your mind and leave while you still have the chance. No one is going to help you. Katara can't be swayed. If the others still want proof of Zuko's intentions, that's up to them. She doesn't want any more proof. She doesn't need it. She would trust Zuko with her life. She already does. Katara! Sokka barks back at her. Come on, let's go. She shakes her head. I'll be there in a minute, she answers. Katara, I mean it! Sokka begins before Toph punches him in the shoulder.
Leave Sugar Queen alone. She probably just wants to scare him a little.
After another moment of silence, Sokka grumbles and stomps off up the hill, dragging Aang by the elbow even as Aang stares bemusedly back over his shoulder. Toph lags behind just long enough to waggle her eyebrows and mouth, "You're welcome," in Katara's general direction before jogging off to catch up with the boys. Katara isn't even sure that the others are out of sight before she races to Zuko's side. He's on his hands and knees, struggling to push himself to his feet with the help of his cane, and his face contorts with the effort. She doesn't so much as pause before her hands close softly around his arm, holding him steady as she helps him rise. For a few silent seconds, he leans hard against her shoulder before he manages to straighten, shifting his weight over to his cane instead. Thanks. His voice is thin, and he won't quite meet her eyes. Katara doesn't care. He's here. His face is pale, and now that she's close, she can hear the slight, painful catches in his breathing. He's unsteady and exhausted, and Katara doesn't mind any of it so long as he's here. Are you okay? She asks. Are you hurt? Is there any... of course you're in pain. How bad is it? Do you need me to... Katara. His voice is quiet, but there is an edge to it, and she can't look him in the eye. I have my water skins here, she continues in a rush. If you're hurting, I can help with the pain so we can make it back to camp. Then after that, I can keep healing you, and maybe someday. This time, he speaks a little louder, a little sharper. Katara. She meets his eyes. His whole face is drawn tight, and this time she can tell that it isn't just the pain in his back and his legs. There's more to it. She looks away again. Is this what you were trying to tell me earlier? That you wanted to? Yes. His voice almost breaks. I wanted to ask if I could come with you. Before she knows what she's doing, she surges forward, wrapping her arms round his chest and burying her face into his sternum. Zuko stiffens a fraction, and she hears his breath catch. I didn't think you wanted me. I did, she whispers. I do. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. A small exhalation, and the tension in his muscles eases a bit. Your letter. That was the only reason I took a chance on coming here. Katara pulls back just far enough to search his eyes. You read it? He nods. It's one of the only things I brought with me. Her eyes squeeze shut, and she can feel her hands shaking as they press against his back, pulling him closer. She'd thought that he would burn the letter, that he would hate her for leaving him behind and never giving him a chance to explain himself. She can't understand why the letter was important enough for him to carry along with him, but maybe it doesn't matter. He came. He's here, and she doesn't think she'll ever be able to let him go. Katara? His voice is small and uncertain. Are you crying? She draws in a shuddering breath as she opens her eyes. Is she? It's so hard to tell. Steadying himself on his cane, Zuko raises his free hand and hesitates an instant before he brushes his thumb across her cheek. It comes away glistening, and his brow furrows. Why are you crying? She closes her eyes again and presses her cheek into his hand even as fresh streams of tears trace their way down her face. She isn't sure she has the words to explain it. The lingering ache of guilt over trying to leave him behind, the heaviness that settles in her chest when she thinks of what he's gone through to make it this far alone, the bone-deep chill at the thought of how much worse it could have been, and above it all, the relief of knowing that he's safe. That he has a place alongside her, and that he wants that place. That she'll be able to wake up in the middle of the night and find his sleeping face only an arm's length away. I didn't know if I was ever going to see you again, she finally whispers, the corner of her lips brushing against his hand. She opens her eyes to see his lips parted in a small, soft expression of surprise. He swallows visibly. I'm sorry I took so long. I thought I was going to be too late. She shakes her head. Don't apologize. You're here now. She looks deep into his soft, tired golden eyes. You're here, she repeats, reaching upward to cup his cheek. Her thumb brushes the lower rim of his scar. I'm so happy that you made it. Slowly, cautiously, his free arm closes in around her waist. I think I've always been on my way here. Katara smiles, stretching upward until her lips are only a breath away from his. I think I have been too. And this time, when she kisses him, though it's hesitant, though she can feel the tears on both their cheeks, Zuko kisses her back.